The morning started badly for Jake Sullivan, and it only got worse from there. The atmospheric processor in Sector 7 was making that grinding noise again, the kind that meant expensive parts were about to break. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnel with his toolbox, cursing under his breath as condensation dripped on his neck. He had been working on Kepler 442b for 3 years now, fixing the same broken systems over and over again. A colony was supposed to be humanity's shining example of expansion into the stars. Instead, it felt like a collection of barely functioning machines held together by duct tape and Jake's growing frustration. The water recyclers leaked, the power grid fluctuated, and the environmental controls had a mind of their own. Every day brought new problems, and Jake was the only technician qualified to handle the complex systems that kept 8,000 colonists alive. He was elbow deep in the processor's cooling system when his comm unit crackled to life. "Jake, you need to get to the administration building right now," said Lisa Thompson, the colony's defense coordinator. Her voice carried an edge of panic that made Jake pause in his work. "I'm kind of busy keeping everyone from suffocating," Jake replied, tightening a loose coupling with his wrench. "Can it wait an hour?" "No, it really can't." "Drop what you're doing and get over here." "Governor's orders." Jake sighed and pulled himself out of the maintenance tunnel. His coveralls were stained with coolant, and his hands were black with grease, but apparently that didn't matter. He grabbed his toolbox and headed across the colony's main plaza, wondering what crisis needed his attention now. The administration. Building buzzed with activity. Colony officials rushed back and forth with tablets and worried expressions. Jake had never seen so many people in suits, looking scared at the same time. Governor Pete Martinez stood in the center of it all, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled anxiety. "Jake, thank God you're here," Martinez said when he spotted the technician. "We have a situation." "Let me guess," Jake said, setting down his toolbox. "The sewage treatment plant is backing up again. Because I told you last month that we needed new filters, but nobody wanted to authorize the expense." "It's not the sewage plant." Martinez gestured toward the main screen, where a massive alien spacecraft hung in space above their planet. The ship was easily 10 times larger than anything humanity had ever built, its hull covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. Jake stared at the screen. "Well, that's new." "They showed up 2 hours ago," Lisa Thompson explained, joining the conversation. "They're calling themselves the Zephyrian Empire. Their leader wants to speak with our government." As if summoned by her words, the screen flickered and changed to show an alien face. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin like polished metal, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the colony's computer systems into flat, emotionless English. "I am War Commander Thexful of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien announced. "Your species has established a colony in territory claimed by the Empire. This is unacceptable." Governor Martinez stepped forward, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "Commander, we weren't aware this system was claimed by your empire. Perhaps we can discuss a peaceful resolution." Thexfal's 4 eyes narrowed. "There is only one resolution acceptable to the Empire. Your colony will surrender completely within 7 standard days, or we will demonstrate why 12 star systems bow to Zephyrian might." "And if we refuse?" Martinez asked. "Then your greatest warrior will face our champion in single combat. When your warrior falls, your colony will surrender anyway, but with far less favorable terms." The alien's teeth glinted in what might have been a smile. "The Empire is not unreasonable. We offer you the honor of combat rather than simply destroying your settlement from orbit." The screen went dark, leaving the administration building in stunned silence. Jake looked around at the faces of the colony's leadership and realized They were all looking back at him. "Why is everyone staring at me?" he asked. "Jake," Martinez said carefully, "we need to discuss our options." The next few hours passed in, a blur of emergency meetings and desperate planning. The colony had no military to speak of, just a small security force led by Captain Amy Rodriguez. Their job was handling disputes between colonists and keeping wildlife away from the settlement, not fighting alien champions in single combat. Jake sat in the corner of the conference room, half listening to the debate while sketching mechanical diagrams on his tablet. The colony's leaders were running through their options, but they all led to the same conclusion. They had no warriors, no heroes, no one trained for this kind of fight. "What about Rodriguez?" suggested Dan Cooper, the intelligence officer. "She has military training." Amy Rodriguez shook her head. "I was a military police officer, not a combat specialist. And I've seen the intelligence reports on Zephyrian warriors. They're bred for fighting. I wouldn't last 5 minutes." "We could try to evacuate," offered another official. 8,000 people? Martinez shook his head. "We don't have the ships, and they'd probably stop us anyway." Jake looked up from his sketching. "What kind of technology do these Zephyrians use?" The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. Lisa Thompson pulled up files on her tablet. "From what we've observed, they have energy weapons, powered armor, some kind of personal shield technology. Their equipment appears to be more advanced than ours." "Can I see the technical specifications?" "Jake, I don't think fixing their equipment is going to help us here," Martinez said with a tired smile. "Maybe not, but I'd like to understand what we're dealing with." Jake stood up and walked to the main screen. "You said they want our greatest warrior, right? What if we don't have one?" "Then we're screwed," Rodriguez said bluntly. Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Or maybe we just change what warrior means." The room fell quiet. Everyone stared at the maintenance technician in his stained coveralls, holding a wrench like it was a sword. "Jake," Martinez said slowly, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I'm tired of everything on this colony breaking down, including our diplomatic relations with alien empires." Jake hefted his wrench, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. "I'm thinking that someone needs to represent humanity in this fight, and apparently that someone is going to be me." The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, Rodriguez spoke up. "Jake, you can't be serious." "These are trained killers, and I'm a trained fixer," Jake replied. "Maybe that's what we need right now." Martinez looked around the room at his advisors, seeing the same desperate hope in their eyes that he felt in his chest. They had no other options, no other volunteers, no other choice. "Jake," he said quietly, "are you sure about this?" Jake thought about the broken atmospheric processor, the leaking water recyclers, the failing power grid, and all the other problems that would still be waiting for him after this alien crisis was resolved. He thought about the 8,000 people depending on the systems he maintained, and the fact that no one else was stepping forward to protect them. "Governor," he said, "I've been fixing impossible problems since I got to this colony. How hard can one more be?" As the meeting broke up and people scattered to make preparations, Jake remained in the conference room, staring at the technical specifications of Zephyrian equipment. Tomorrow, he would have to face an alien champion in single combat with nothing but his tools and his knowledge. It was, he reflected, probably going to be just another day at the office. Jake spent the night in his workshop, surrounded by technical manuals and half-finished repair projects. Sleep felt like a waste of time when he had less than 6 days to prepare for something he didn't really understand. The Zephyrian technical specifications glowed on his tablet screen, and the more he studied them, the more questions he had. Their energy weapons used a power coupling system that seemed inefficient. The armor's joint mechanisms showed signs of over-engineering. The personal shields ran on a frequency modulation that looked unstable under stress. Jake made notes on everything, sketching improvements and identifying weak points like he was preparing for a maintenance inspection rather than a fight to the death. Captain Amy Rodriguez found him there at dawn, hunched over his workbench with a cup of cold coffee and grease under his fingernails. "Jake, we need to talk about training," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "I know you volunteered for this, but I can't let you walk into that arena without some kind of preparation." Jake looked up from his tablet, blinking tired. "Eyes, what kind of training did you have in mind?" "Basic combat techniques. How to move, how to defend yourself, how to attack effectively." Rodriguez gestured toward the colony's small gymnasium. "I've cleared the space for the next few days. We can work on physical conditioning, weapon handling, tactical thinking." "Amy, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think that's going to help much." Jake turned his tablet around to show her the Zephyrian armor specifications. "Look at this. Their champion is going to be 7 feet tall, wearing powered armor that enhances strength and speed. He's been training for combat his entire life. No amount of basic training is going to let me beat him in a straight fight." Rodriguez studied the technical readouts with a frown. "Then what's your plan? You can't just walk out there with a wrench and hope for the best." "Why not?" Jake asked. "That's basically what I do every day anyway. Something breaks, I figure out why, and I fix it. Maybe this isn't that different. Jake, this is combat, not maintenance." "Is it though?" Jake highlighted sections of the armor specifications. "Look at these systems. They're incredibly complex, which means they're incredibly fragile. Every system has failure points, stress limits, design flaws. The more advanced something is, the more things can go wrong with it." Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, beginning to understand. "You're planning to sabotage his equipment." "I'm planning to fix it," Jake corrected. "Fix it so it works the way it should instead of the way it was designed. There's a difference." Over the next 3 days, Jake divided his time between studying Zephyrian technology and keeping the colony's infrastructure running. The atmospheric processors still needed attention, the water recyclers still leaked, and the power grid still fluctuated. Life went on even with an alien dreadnought hanging over their heads. Dan Cooper, the intelligence officer, became Jake's unofficial research partner. He had managed to intercept more detailed scans of Zephyrian equipment, including real-time operational data from their ship's systems. Jake pored over every detail, building a mental map of how their technology functioned. "Their power distribution is all wrong," Jake muttered, pointing at energy flow diagrams. "They're running everything through central processors instead of distributed networks. One disruption could cascade through multiple systems." "Is that useful?" Cooper asked. "Everything is useful when you're trying to understand how something works." Jake made another note on his tablet. "The question is whether I can access those systems during the fight." News of the impending duel spread through the colony, despite efforts to keep it quiet. Jake found himself receiving visitors in his workshop. Some offered encouragement, others brought gifts, and a few seemed to be saying goodbye. He accepted it all with the same tired patience he showed for routine maintenance requests. Beth Williams, one of the colony's senior engineers, stopped by on the 4th day with a modified cum unit. "I've been working with Roy Adams on this," she explained, handing Jake the device. "It's a real-time analysis scanner. Point it at any piece of technology, and it will give you detailed breakdowns of power flow, structural stress, system efficiency, things like that." Jake examined the device, impressed by the craftsmanship. "This is good work. How does it interface?" "With alien technology? We tested it on the Zephyrian ship's external systems," Roy Adams said, joining the conversation. "The basic principles seem universal. Energy is energy. Structure is structure. The scanner should work on their equipment." "Should?" We won't know for sure until you try it, Beth admitted. But it's better than going in blind. Jake clipped the scanner to his tool belt next to his wrench. Thanks, both of you. This could make a real difference. On the 5th day, War Commander Thexfall's voice echoed through the colony's communication system again. Humans of Kepler 442b, you have 2 days remaining to choose your champion. Our warrior, Champion Kethmer, grows eager for battle. He has defeated the greatest fighters of 12 worlds. Your representative will join that honored list of the fallen. Jake was replacing a faulty valve in the colony's main water line when the announcement played. He paused in his work, wrench in hand, and considered the alien's words. 12 worlds. Hundreds of defeated warriors. A lifetime of training and combat experience. He went back to fixing the valve. That evening, Governor Martinez found Jake in the cafeteria, eating dinner alone while reading technical manuals on his tablet. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Martinez sat down across from the technician. Do you really think you can win this fight? Jake looked up from his tablet, considering the question seriously. Pete, in 3 years on this colony, I've fixed atmospheric processors that were completely dead, jury-rigged power systems that should have been impossible to repair, and kept 8,000 people alive with equipment that was failing faster. And I could maintain it. Every day, I solve problems that the original designers said couldn't be solved. That's not the same as combat, isn't it? Jake gestured around the cafeteria, with its humming lights and filtered air. Every system in this colony is in combat with entropy, trying not to break down and kill everyone. My job is to win that fight, every single day. The Zephyrian champion is just another system that needs adjustment. Martinez studied the maintenance. Technician's face, seeing determination mixed with the exhaustion that came from years of thankless work. What if you're wrong? What if it really is just a fight, and all your technical knowledge doesn't matter? Jake shrugged and returned to his tablet. Then I guess we'll find out together. But Pete, someone has to try. And right now, I'm the only one volunteering. The 6th day passed quietly. Jake completed his normal maintenance rounds, checked on the atmospheric processors, and reviewed the colony's technical systems one final time. Everything was running as well as it ever did, which meant it was barely functional, but unlikely to kill anyone in the immediate future. That night, he cleaned his tools with unusual care. His wrench, his scanner, his basic maintenance equipment. They weren't weapons in any traditional sense, but they were what he had. They would have to be enough. Captain Rodriguez stopped by his quarters before he went to sleep. Jake, I know you don't want combat training, but can I give you one piece of advice? What's that? Don't try to be a hero tomorrow. Just be yourself. Be the guy who fixes things when they break. That's gotten you this far. Jake nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. Thanks, Amy. I'll try to remember that. As he settled into bed, Jake thought about the morning to come. Somewhere above them, Champion Kethmer was probably preparing for battle, sharpening weapons and testing armor. Jake had spent his evening organizing his toolbox. It was, he reflected, probably the most normal thing he could have done. The arena was nothing more than a cleared section of ground outside the colony's main perimeter, marked by energy barriers that would contain the combat. Jake stood at the edge of the designated area, watching Zephyrian shuttles land in precise formation. Alien soldiers emerged in ceremonial dress, their armor gleaming in the morning sun. Everything about their arrival spoke of military precision and overwhelming power. Jake wore his usual work coveralls, the same ones he had been wearing when he volunteered for this fight. His tool belt hung at his waist, weighted down with his wrench, the scanner Beth had given him, and a few other basic maintenance tools. He looked like exactly what he was, a technician who had wandered onto a battlefield by mistake. Governor Martinez stood beside him, along with the rest of the colonies. Leadership. They tried to project confidence, but Jake could see the worry in their eyes. 8,000 lives hung in the balance of the next hour, and their fate rested with a man whose greatest achievement was keeping their air recyclers functional. Jake, Martinez said quietly, it's not too late to change your mind. We could try to negotiate, maybe offer something else. Like what? Jake asked, checking the settings on his scanner. They want a warrior to represent humanity. This is what humanity looks like. War Commander Thexval's shuttle landed with a hiss of hydraulics and alien engineering. The War Commander emerged first, his 4 eyes scanning the human gathering, with obvious disdain. Behind him came Champion Kethmer, and Jake had to admit the alien was impressive. Kethmer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body encased in powered armor that hummed with energy. The armor was a work of art, every surface covered in intricate designs that seemed to shift and move in the light. His helmet resembled a predator's skull, with glowing eye slits that tracked movement. In his hands, he carried an energy sword that crackled with barely contained power. Humans, Thexval announced, his voice carrying across the arena through built-in amplifiers. Witness the champion of the Zephyrian Empire. Kethmer has defeated 300 warriors in single combat. He has brought honor to the Empire on a dozen worlds. Today, he adds another victory to his legend. Kethmer stepped forward and activated his energy sword. The weapon blazed to life with a sound like controlled lightning. He moved through a series of practice forms, each motion fluid and deadly. The demonstration was clearly intended to intimidate, and Jake had to admit it was working. And this, Thexval continued, his gaze falling on Jake, is humanity's champion? Jake stepped into the arena, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. Compared to Kethmer's impressive display, he looked laughably out of place. Several Zephyrians in the observation area made sounds that might have been laughter. I am, Jake said simply. Thexval's 4 eyes narrowed. What is your weapon, human? Jake held up his wrench. This. The laughter from the Zephyrian observers grew louder. Even Kethmer seemed confused, tilting his helmeted head as he studied the simple tool. This is insulting, Thexval declared. The Empire offers you the honor of combat, and you send a maintenance worker with a piece of scrap metal? I'm not insulting anyone, Jake replied, walking closer to the center of the arena. I'm just being practical. This is what I know how to use. The formal combat protocols began with Thexval reading a list of rules that seemed designed more for ceremony than actual guidance. Single combat until one fighter yielded or could no longer continue. No outside interference. Victory would determine the fate of the human colony. Jake listened with half his attention while studying Kethmer's equipment through his scanner. The device painted invisible overlays across his vision, showing power flows and structural stress points. The champion's armor was incredibly sophisticated, but sophistication meant complexity, and complexity meant vulnerability. Let the combat begin, Thexval announced. Kethmer immediately launched into an attack, his energy sword sweeping in a deadly arc toward Jake's head. The technician threw himself sideways, rolling across the rocky ground as the weapon sliced through the air. Where he had been standing, the sword left a glowing trail in its wake and scorched the ground where it touched. The champion pressed his advantage, moving with fluid grace despite his armor's bulk. Each attack was precise and deadly, designed to end the fight quickly. Jake scrambled away from the strikes, using his smaller size and knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of the alien's reach. But he wasn't just running. As he dodged and weaved, Jake was studying Kethmer's equipment through his scanner. The armor's power distribution showed interesting patterns. The energy sword drew massive amounts of power from the suit's main reactor, causing fluctuations in other systems. The personal shields flickered slightly during high-energy attacks. Kethmer paused in his assault, perhaps expecting his opponent to make a stand. "You cannot run forever, human," he said, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. "I'm not running," Jake replied, circling around a rock formation. "I'm troubleshooting." The champion's energy sword hummed as he prepared for another attack. Jake could see the power build up through his scanner, watch the energy flow from the armor's reactor through distribution nodes to the weapon's focusing crystal. It was actually quite elegant engineering, but there was a problem with the coupling. Efficiency. Kethmer lunged forward, his sword aimed at Jake's chest. This time, instead of dodging completely, Jake twisted aside and brought his wrench down on the weapon's power coupling. The impact was precise, hitting exactly the right spot at exactly the right moment. The energy sword flickered and dimmed, its blazing light reduced to a weak glow. Kethmer stared at his weapon in confusion, then at the human technician who had somehow damaged it with a simple tool. "What did you do?" the champion demanded. "Fixed your power coupling," Jake explained, backing away as Kethmer swung the weakened sword at him. It was running at 112% efficiency, which was causing harmonic resonance in the focusing crystal. I adjusted it down to optimal levels. The Zephyrian observers had gone quiet. This wasn't how combat usually proceeded in their experience. Warriors didn't explain technical problems to each other in the middle of a fight. Kethmer armor compensated for the weapon malfunction by redirecting power from other systems. His personal shield strengthened, and his armor's servomotors increased their output. He was faster now, but Jake's scanner showed the trade-offs. Life support was running at minimum levels, and the armor's cooling system was starting to struggle. With the increased power draw, the champion attacked again, this time relying on his armor's enhanced strength rather than his damaged weapon. His armored fists moved like hammers, each blow capable of crushing stone. Jake danced around the attacks, occasionally reaching out with his wrench to tap specific points on the armor's surface. Each tap looked random to the observers, but Jake was following the power distribution patterns shown on his scanner. A quick adjustment to a servo regulator here, a realignment of a feedback sensor there. Kethmer's armor was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly complicated. Every system depended on dozens of others, and small changes could have cascading effects. "Stop running and fight." Kethmer roared, his voice distorted by failing audio systems. "I am fighting," Jake replied, ducking under a wild swing and adjusting something on the armor's backplate. "I'm fighting your equipment's design flaws." The armor's cooling system was definitely struggling now. Jake could see heat patterns building up in critical components. The Zephyrians had built an incredibly powerful suit, but they had pushed it beyond its thermal limits. In a normal fight, that might not matter. But Jake wasn't fighting normally. Kethmer stumbled as his armors left. Leg servo developed a feedback loop. The champion caught himself and kept attacking, but his movements were becoming less coordinated. Systems that had worked perfectly for years were suddenly developing problems. "What are you doing to me?" Kethmer demanded, his voice now noticeably distorted. Jake paused in his evasions to check his scanner readings. The armor's power grid was becoming unstable, with fluctuations spreading through multiple systems. It was like watching a cascade failure in the colony's infrastructure, except this time he was the one causing it. "I'm not doing anything to you," Jake said honestly. "I'm fixing your armor so it works properly instead of being pushed beyond its design specifications." He reached out with his wrench and made one more adjustment, this time to the armor's primary power regulator. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Kethmer's entire suit locked up, servo motors seizing as conflicting control signals created a system-wide deadlock. The champion stood frozen in the center of the arena, his armor rigid and unresponsive. Inside the suit, Jake could hear him, struggling with manual controls, but the armor's automated systems were too confused to respond properly. And then, with a sound like escaping gas, the life support system began to fail. Jake heard the change in Kethmer's breathing immediately. The champion's voice, which had been strong and clear through his helmet speakers, became labored and desperate. The armor's life support system was cycling incorrectly, pumping out breathable atmosphere faster than it could process new air. "Your life support is failing," Jake announced, setting down his wrench and pulling out a smaller tool from his belt. "Hold still, I can fix it." Kethmer tried to speak, but his words came out as gasps. The warrior who had defeated 300 opponents was suffocating inside his own armor. Around the arena, Zephyrian observers stood in stunned silence. This wasn't how their champion was supposed to fall. War Commander Thexful stepped forward. "What trickery is this, human?" "It's not trickery," Jake replied, approaching the frozen champion. "It's basic maintenance. Your armor is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly poorly maintained. When was the last time someone performed a full system diagnostic on this suit?" Jake didn't wait for an answer. He was already working on the life support coupling, his scanner showing him exactly where the problem lay. The system's filters were clogged, the atmospheric processor was running backwards, and the emergency backup had been disabled by a software conflict. "The filters haven't been cleaned in months," Jake continued, opening an access panel on Kethmer. "Back. The atmospheric processor is trying to run on a power coupling that's been jury-rigged with incompatible components. And someone disabled the backup life support because it was interfering with the armor's stealth systems." He worked quickly, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years fixing critical systems under pressure. "Clean the filters, realign the atmospheric processor, reactivate the backup system with a proper power bypass." Basic maintenance that should have been done regularly. Kethmer's breathing improved almost immediately. The champion's helmet speakers crackled back to life as oxygen levels returned to normal. "Why?" Kethmer asked, his voice weak with confusion. "Why are you helping me?" Jake finished his work and stepped back, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "Because I'm not going to let someone suffocate just to win a fight. That's not what this is about." The arena remained silent. Even the Zephyrian observers seemed unsure how to react. Their champion was alive and breathing properly, but he was still trapped inside armor that refused to respond to his commands. "Besides," Jake added, "fixing your life support doesn't change the fact that your armor is completely locked up. You can breathe fine, but you can't move." Dexfall's 4 eyes fixed on the human technician. "Explain what you have done." Jake gestured toward Kethmer's immobilized form. "Your armor is over-engineered. Every system is connected to every other system, which makes it incredibly powerful, but also incredibly fragile. Change one thing, and it affects everything else." He pulled out his scanner and showed the readings to the war commander. "Look at this power distribution network. It's trying to run 17 different systems through 3 main processors, with backup systems that interfere with primary operations and safety protocols that conflict with combat protocols. The armor has served the Empire for generations." Dexful said stiffly, "I'm sure it has, but that doesn't mean it's well designed." Jake walked around Kethmer's frozen form, pointing out specific components. "This servo regulator is running at twice its recommended load because it's trying to compensate for a worn bearing in the left shoulder joint. The power coupling I adjusted earlier was overpressurized because the main reactor is producing 8% more output than it did when the armor was new, but nobody updated the regulation systems." He stopped in front of the champion and addressed him directly. "How long have you been having problems with system lag during extended combat?" Kethmer was quiet for a moment, 2 years, he finally admitted. And overheating in the leg servos? 18 months. Audio distortion when using maximum power output? 6 months, Jake nodded. All symptoms of the same underlying problem. Your armor is fighting itself. Every system is trying to optimize for different priorities, and they're getting in each other's way. War Commander Thexvol stepped closer, his metallic features reflecting growing interest rather than anger. You can see all of this from your ... scanner? The scanner helps, but mostly it's just experience. When you spend enough time fixing complex systems, you learn to recognize the patterns. Jake tapped his wrench against his palm. Every piece of equipment has its own personality. This armor is basically having a nervous breakdown. Can you repair it? Kethmer asked. Of course I can repair it. The question is whether I should. Jake looked around the arena at the assembled Zephyrians. This was supposed to be single combat, to determine the fate of our colony. Technically, I've won. Your champion can't continue fighting. Thexvol considered this. The combat parameters have been satisfied, he admitted. But I confess, human, your methods are ... unprecedented. My name is Jake, the technician corrected, and my methods are just troubleshooting. I identify problems. I find solutions. I implement fixes. It's what I do every day. Jake, Thexvol repeated, testing the name. You fight like no warrior we have encountered. That's because I'm not a warrior. I'm a maintenance technician. There's a difference. Jake walked over to his toolbox and selected a specialized calibration tool. I'm going to unlock your champions. Armor now, but I want to make something clear. The systems will work better than they have in years, but they'll also be different. I'm going to optimize them for efficiency rather than raw power. Different how? Kethmer asked. Well, for starters, your energy sword will run at 95% of its previous maximum output, but it will be stable and won't drain power from other systems. Your strength enhancement will be slightly reduced, but your endurance will improve dramatically. And your armor will actually keep you at a comfortable temperature instead of slowly cooking you. Jake began working on the armor's main control processor, his tools making soft clicking sounds as he adjusted settings and replaced components. Around the arena, Zephyrian observers pressed closer, trying to understand what the human was doing to their champion's equipment. The servo lag will be gone, Jake continued, but the response curve will be smoother rather than twitchy. Your heads-up display will be clearer, but it won't update quite as fast. And your life support will actually work the way it was designed to, instead of fighting with itself. System by system, Kethmer's armor came back to life. But as Jake had promised, it felt different. The champion flexed his fingers experimentally, then took a careful step forward. The movement was smooth and controlled, without the slight resistance he had grown accustomed to over the years. This feels ... double quotes. Kethmer paused, searching for words. Better. Why does it feel better? Because it's working properly for the first time in years, Jake replied, packing his tools away. Your armor wasn't designed to be a struggle between you and the machine. It was designed to be an extension of your body. Kethmer activated his energy sword. The blade blazed to life with a pure, steady light, free of the flickers and surges that had plagued it before. He moved through a series of combat forms, and even the Zephyrian observers could see the difference. Every motion was precise, effortless, controlled, remarkable, Thexvol murmured. How did you know what needed to be corrected? Jake shrugged. Like I said, it's just troubleshooting. Every problem has a solution if you're willing to look for it. The war commander studied the human technician with all four eyes. Jake of the humans, you have satisfied the terms of combat through means we did not expect. Your colony's fate is yours to determine. Actually, Jake said, I have a different idea. War Commander Thexvol tilted his head, all four eyes focusing on Jake with renewed interest. What kind of idea, human? Jake looked around the arena at the assembled Zephyrians, then at his own people, watching from behind the energy barriers. Well, from what I can see, you have a problem. Your technology is incredibly advanced, but it's not being maintained properly. That armor, he gestured toward Kethmer, should have been serviced months ago. Your shuttles are running with power, couplings that are out of alignment. Even your ship up there is showing signs of systematic neglect. You can see all of this from here? Dexval asked, skepticism creeping into his voice. Some of it, but mostly I can tell from the way your equipment behaves. Everything works, but nothing works as well as it should. Jake pulled out his scanner and pointed it toward the nearest Zephyrian shuttle. Look at that landing strut. See how it's compensating for a hydraulic leak? And the power distributor on the left side is running hot because someone bypassed a failed regulator instead of replacing it. The war commander followed Jake's gaze, and his expression grew thoughtful. Our technicians have reported no problems with that shuttle. That's because your technicians don't know what to look for. They're trained to keep things running, not to make them run well. Jake clicked his scanner back to his belt. The Empire controls 12 star systems, right? How much time and resources do you spend on equipment failures? How many missions have been delayed or compromised because something broke at the wrong moment? Dexval was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of admission. More than we would prefer. I thought so. Jake turned to address both the war commander and champion Kethmer. Here's my proposal. Instead of demanding our surrender, why don't we make a deal? My colony needs protection and trade opportunities. Your empire needs someone who actually understands how to maintain advanced technology. We both get what we need. Kethmer stepped forward, his repaired armor moving with fluid grace. You would work for the Empire? Not work for, Jake corrected. Work with. As an independent contractor. I help you solve your maintenance problems. You help us establish ourselves as a legitimate colony with trading rights and protection. Governor Martinez pushed forward through the crowd of human observers. Jake, what are you proposing exactly? A technical consultation agreement, Jake replied. I spend some time each month working on Zephyrian equipment problems, training their technicians, maybe developing better maintenance protocols. In exchange, they recognize our colony's sovereignty and establish formal trade relations. War Commander. Dexval's four eyes narrowed as he considered the proposal. What makes you think the Empire would be interested in such an arrangement? Jake gestured toward Kethmer armor. Because in 20 minutes, I solved problems that have been plaguing your champion for years. Problems that your own technicians didn't even know existed. How much time and resources could you save across 12 star systems if your equipment actually worked the way it was designed to? The war commander began pacing, his metallic features reflecting deep thought. Around the arena, other Zephyrian officers had gathered to listen to the conversation. Jake could see interest in their expressions, the kind of look that said they had been dealing with similar equipment problems themselves. There would be complications, Dexval said finally. The Empire does not typically enter into agreements with species we have not conquered. Then maybe it's time to try something new, Jake suggested. Conquest is expensive. It requires resources, time, ongoing military presence. Trade agreements are much more efficient. And if the Empire's enemies discover that we have formed an alliance rather than conquered your colony? Jake shrugged. Tell them you conquered us. From a practical standpoint, what's the difference? You get what you need, we get what we need, and everyone saves face. Champion Kethmer had been listening to the exchange while testing his repaired armor systems. War Commander, if I may speak, Dexval nodded permission. This human has done something in minutes that our technicians could not accomplish in months. My armor feels as it did when it was new, perhaps better. If he can achieve similar results with other equipment. Kethmer paused, considering his words carefully. The tactical advantages would be considerable. You're talking about giving military secrets to an alien species, one of the other Zephyrian officers pointed out. I'm talking about finally making our military equipment work properly, Kethmer replied. Jake, show them the power coupling. Adjustment you made to my energy sword. Jake walked over to the champion and opened a panel on the weapon's grip. See this regulator? It was set to maintain peak output at all times, which created harmonic resonance in the focusing crystal. I adjusted it to vary output based on actual demand, which eliminated the resonance and reduced power consumption by 12%. Gathered Zephyrians pressed closer to examine the modification. Jake could see recognition dawning in their expressions as they realized the implications. 12% power reduction, one officer murmured. Applied across our entire fleet ... would extend operational range significantly, another completed. War Commander Thexval studied Jake with what might have been respect. You solved this problem without any knowledge of our technology's specifications or design principles. I didn't need to know the specifications, Jake replied. I just needed to understand how energy flows through the system and where inefficiencies were occurring. Basic principles are universal. And you could teach our technicians to do the same? Sure. It's not complicated once you know what to look for. Most of your people are probably already good at keeping things running. They just need to learn how to make things run better. Governor Martinez stepped into the conversation. War Commander, what would this agreement look like from a practical standpoint? Thexval considered the question. The Empire would recognize. Your colony has an autonomous technical research station under our protection. You would have trading rights within Imperial space and access to our commercial networks. In exchange, you would provide technical consultation services and training for our maintenance personnel. What about our independence? Martinez asked. You would govern yourselves according to your own laws, provided they do not conflict with Imperial security interests. Your people would be free to come and go as they please. The arrangement would be reviewed annually and could be modified or terminated by mutual agreement. Jake looked at his governor. Pete, that's better than anything we could have hoped for. When this started, Martinez nodded slowly. It is. But Jake, are you willing to take on that kind of responsibility? You'd essentially be representing humanity to an entire interstellar empire. I'd just be doing what I always do, Jake replied. Fixing things that are broken. The scale might be bigger, but the principles are the same. War Commander Thexval extended one armored hand toward Jake. Jake of the humans, the Empire accepts your proposal. We will draw up formal agreements and present them to your leadership for review. Jake shook the alien's hand, noting that the War Commander's armor also showed signs of poor maintenance. Thexval, when we get the paperwork sorted out, remind ME to take a look at your armor's joint actuators. They're about 3 weeks away from seizing up completely. The War Commander's 4 eyes widened in surprise. How could you possibly know that? Because they're making a grinding noise every time you move your left arm, and the servo compensation is causing your right shoulder to overcorrect. Jake grinned. Like I said, it's just troubleshooting. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the various officials began discussing details, Jake found himself surrounded by Zephyrian technicians, eager to understand what he had done to their champion's armor. He answered their questions patiently, sketching diagrams and explaining principles while they took notes on their alien tablets. Captain Amy Rodriguez approached him during a lull in the technical discussions. Jake, do you realize what you've just done? Fixed some equipment and avoided a war? You've made humanity a technical partner to an interstellar empire. We went from facing conquest to becoming essential allies in the span of an hour. Jake, looked around at the mixed crowd of humans and Zephyrians, all working together to understand complex technical problems. Amy, I just did what made sense. Their equipment was broken. I knew how to fix it. They needed what I could provide. Sometimes, the best solution is the obvious one. And if this doesn't work out, if the Empire changes its mind, then we'll figure out a new solution when we get to it. Jake hefted his wrench, feeling its familiar weight. That's what we do, right? Fix problems as they come up. Later that evening, after the Zephyrians had returned to their ship and the colony had begun to process what had happened, Jake sat in his workshop reviewing maintenance schedules. Tomorrow, the atmospheric processors would still need attention. The water recyclers would still leak, and the power grid would still fluctuate. But now he also had an entire Star Empire's worth of equipment to think about. Governor Martinez found him there, surrounded by technical manuals and half-finished projects. Jake, the Colony Council wants to offer you a promotion. Chief of Engineering, with your own staff and a significant pay increase.